Bismillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. We will continue inshallah with our classes. So what did we discuss yesterday? Abdullah, can you say? That's a class title, right? But I'm asking, like, tell me something about the concepts that we learned, some one or two lines. Yeah, yeah. So, So to say it in a very short and precise way, this use effect, it takes two arguments. The first one is a function, okay, and the second one is a dependency array, okay. So this function will run at least one time, okay. For every component, if you define any use effect, that function will run at least once, and that is during the mounting of the component. And after that, whenever the variables in the dependency array changes, the function will run. Right now, if you see it's empty, so which means that it will run only once actually. After that, it won't run between re-renders. But if you declare some other variable here, for example count, then this means that it will run during the first time, and also every time the count changes. Type. And if you don't give any dependency array, that means that it will run during every re-render. Yeah, every re-render it will run, okay. So this is a very useful feature, okay. And yesterday we also discussed why you can't, like, whatever logic that you're going to put between these two brackets, why don't you put it somewhere else, like in this case, right, after line number 8. The reason is because we want to keep things separate, okay, decoupling, and that gives you a lot of advantages, and it makes your code easy to maintain and understand, okay. And so that's all about use effect, and there are some more few details, and inshallah we will be covering that. I think naturally we will be speaking about those things naturally as we learn more and more. So what shall I do in this class? So we covered use effect, use state, okay, and okay, let me share one important rule, okay, with regards to hooks, okay. This is a hook, right, use state. Yes, hook is a function generally, but the difference is that there are so this is the difference actually. We are speaking about difference now, okay. So use state is a hook and use effect is a hook, and these things are used inside React components. Like, you can't use these things inside normal functions actually. This is a React component, right? The greetings is a React component, and how do we say it's a React component? Yeah, so it starts with capital G actually, capital letter. So that is what declares this as a React component. So you can use hooks inside React components only, okay, or inside some other hooks. In the sense that we will discuss about custom hooks inshallah. This is a inbuilt hook, right? Use state is something offered by React, right? We didn't build this, right? But we can define our own hooks as well. Just like we can have our own function, right? For example, if you see, this is a function that I wrote, right? That we wrote, right? Our own function, right? Likewise, this is also our own function. Likewise, we can define our own hooks as well. Okay. So we'll come, inshallah. We'll speak about inshallah those things later, inshallah, how to define our own hooks. But right now, what we are discussing is, if you have a hook, okay, that can be called inside a React component, or that can be called inside other hooks, okay, but it can't be called inside a normal function. For example, let's say I have a function here, const get sum, okay, is equal to, this is a small function, okay. What that will do, will just say it will return 1 plus 2. Type. So this is my function, right? I can't call any hook inside this. Like, I can't say something like this, like count is equal to use state. This is not possible. Why it's not possible? Because this is a normal function. This is not a React component, neither this is a hook. Okay. So this is not valid actually. Hooks can only be called inside React components or other hooks. Okay. So that's the first point. The first so rules of hook. Okay. I think in the documentation you can find that inshallah. So React hook rules of hooks. This is a old documentation. They should have a section in the new documentation as well, but let me show it here. If you come to here, right, you can see they have given some rules here. Okay, he say hooks can only call hooks from React functions. Call hooks from React function components. Okay, that's what we discussed right now. It can be called from our React component. That's one thing. Or the second thing is it can be called from other hooks. If you have your own hook, you can use hooks inside that as well. Okay, call hooks from custom hooks. Now, what? Both are same actually. Yeah, see, this is a function, right? Actually, this is a React component, we know that. But why do we say it's a function component? You can look at the structure here, right? This is how a function looks, right? It has this syntax, like arrow syntax, and it takes some input, and it will give you some return value, right? So this is a function component actually. This is also a function, this is also a React component. So we can combine those two things and say it's a React functional component. Okay, but there are other components, for example class components. They are also React components, but you will be defining them as classes, not like functions. Okay, yeah, React class components. These are React functional components. Okay, and right now if you see the most modern thing is that we use functional components. As for class components, they are like a old thing. We don't use that anymore actually. Like you can use it, but I don't think there's any more use case for that, because functional components are very easy to write and maintain actually. It's very easy to understand. As for class components, it's kind of complex and unnecessarily it doesn't it's not good actually, but this is very good actually. That is why they even like if you look at the documentation, they recommend that you should be using functional components only. Okay. Now, no. User interface means whatever you see on the screen. Yes, for example, if you have VS Code, right? This is a user interface for VS Code. Why? So, what is the meaning of interface? Interface means it's a medium through which you can communicate with something else. So, it's a very generic word. Okay. Let's say, for example, if you have an AC, right? So you have an AC there. So if I want to change the temperature, or if I want to change the fan speed, what I am doing is I'm using the remote, right? So the remote is an interface. Using this remote, I am able to communicate with my AC. So it's a medium. So interface means a medium through which you can communicate with something else. Right now, if you see, we have VS Code. VS Code has a lot of features, right? How are we communicating with it? That's a software program, right? So we are interacting with that program by way of this user interface. All these icons, buttons, typing, and all these things. And we also discussed about CLI, right? This is command line interface. For example, we have Git, right? Git is also a software. But how we are interacting with that? By way of the terminal. So that's why you say this is command line interface. So interface means it's something through which you can interact, okay? Generally, when we say user interface, right, we refer to this, what you see on the screen actually. That is like a graphical user interface. We spoke about this previously, right, in the beginning, GUI. We have CLI, which is the command line interface, and we have the GUI, which is the graphical user interface, which is something you can see visually, right? Like all these icons and all these menus and all these things, the GUI. So user interface is something that you see on the screen generally, but it's a very generic term actually, okay? But as far as React is concerned, right, of course it is what you see on the screen, because React is a front-end framework, right? It is used to build it's visual stuff, right? Right? So in the context of React, user interface refers to what you see on the screen now. All those components, all those buttons and everything, yeah. Buttons, divisions, yeah. Type. So we were discussing about the rules of hooks. So the first rule is rules of hooks. The first rule is that hooks can be called only from within React components. Okay. Okay, let me be more precise. React functional components or from other hooks. Okay, that's the first rule. Okay, the second rule is hooks should always be called at the top level, topmost level. The meaning of that is you can't put hooks inside if else or inside loops, etc. If you take this component here, right, React component right here, which is the topmost level, this is the topmost level right here, these things. As for if you take line number 17, right, this line is not in the topmost level. Why? Because it is inside this function here. Okay, so whatever is between these two brackets, for example, this space, right, this is not the topmost level. Okay, and you can't call hooks inside those type of level. You can only call hooks on the topmost level. Like you can call here, you can call here, you can write hook here, but you can't put here because this is one level deeper. Okay, and the reason why you should not put it here is because generally when you do like that, right, it will be mainly maybe because inside a function like this. Okay, so this function, only if this function is called, that hook will be called, right? Right? If this function is not called, the hook will not be called. Right? Likewise, when you put inside if else, if some condition, okay, if you put a hook here, for example, let's say const name is equal to useState, something like that. Okay, let me so you are writing some hook here. This hook will run only if the condition is true, right? Likewise, what happens if you put in a for loop? For some variables, right, where I is equal to 0, I less than some 5, I plus plus, and if you put here, right, for example, put some hook here, what happens in that case? The hook it runs depends upon the conditions here actually. For example, let's say this is count actually, in this case I less than count. Depending upon the value of count, those hooks will be called, right. If the count is 0, for example, the hook won't even be called one time actually. But if the count is 1, it will be called one time. If the count is 2, it will be called that many. So the number of times hook is called depends upon these things that you define here, right. Right. So it can't be like this actually. It has to be fixed. Like the number of times you are going to call a hook should be fixed, and that fixedness will not be there if you put it inside a deeper level. For example, if you put inside a hook, you can't guarantee that every time the component re-renders, that hook will be called the same number of times, right? Because the components will re-render, right? Whenever the state or prop changes, React will come and will execute everything once again, right? For example, in this case, if the count changes, what happens? It will come and again execute line number 13. So this hook will be called once again actually, but the value won't be resetted, but it will be called actually, right? Like we discussed yesterday. This will be called. This hook will also be called actually. Likewise, every hook will be called. Okay. So if you want to make sure that during every re-render or every running, the hooks they are called exactly the same number of times, then that is only possible if you put it in the topmost level. Okay, you can only ensure that you can make sure that the hooks are called exactly the same number of times during every re-render, and also in the same order. Order is also very important actually. Like, okay, so this hook should be called before this hook actually, every re-render. But if you put inside functions, right, the order may be different between different re-renders. It's not guaranteed. It depends upon the logic that you write in your code. The reason is because React's depends on this actually. React depends on the requirement that the hooks should be called in the same order during every re-render, and they should be called the same number of times during every re-render. React needs that to work properly. So it can make sure that this requirement is met only if you define the hooks on the topmost level. So this is another second rule actually. Hooks should always be called on the topmost level, okay, and that means it cannot be called inside conditionals, meaning if else, okay, loops, okay, functions, etc. It may even throw error actually. Let's try this, but you should not do this. Okay, let's check that. Okay, but the thing is, this is condition number 2. The reason for this rule is that React expects all the hooks to be called the same number of times, in the same order throughout all re-renders. Okay, React needs this to work properly, to function properly. Okay. So that is why you can't do like this actually. Now let's do one thing. Let us try to define a hook inside a conditional and see what happens. Let me say if true. Okay, even though this condition will always be true, this is always going to be true, right? Anyway, but still we will see. Okay, let's have a variable condition is equal to false. Okay, let's give that to true. Let's see what happens in this case. Okay, the server is not started. Okay, so here in this case, if you see this count will not be accessible. The reason is because this count writer, this is now defined in different scope writer. See, it even thrown an error here now. What does it say? React hook use state is called in a function getSum that is neither a React functional component nor a custom hook function. Okay. So it is speaking about this line here actually. This use state. It is being called inside where it's a normal function getSum. So it's throwing the error for us. So because this is a violation, right? Violation of rule number 1, right? So that's why we are getting this error. So let me delete that. Again we have another error which is, see here, line number 10, React hook use state is called conditionally. See, React hooks must be called in the exact same order in every component render, okay? So it's speaking about this line here, it's calling conditionally, right? It depends upon the condition, right? So you can't ensure that this condition will always be true. The condition will be based on this value, right? So if the value changes, the condition will be false. So you can't ensure that during every re-render, that hook will be called. So that's why it's throwing error for you, okay? So these are the hooks, rules of hooks, okay? Now what we can do, we discussed this, so what shall we do now? Shall we look at list rendering? Okay, then why don't we do one thing? Okay, shall we build a small to-do app? We'll apply everything that we learned, okay? Inshallah. So now what we'll do is, let me clean this stuff. Okay, so let me take this out. These things, Okay, let me delete everything. Okay, so I'm going to delete this component completely. Okay, yeah. So let me now if you see, okay, the component is not there. So we have an empty app right now. So we are going to build a to-do app. Okay, to-do app means first you have a form here. Okay, small input field. I can put some task there, and if I click on add button, that task will be added as to do. Okay, and then so I'll have a list of to dos there, and I can mark every to do as done. Okay, so I can mark a to do as done. I can also delete that to do. Okay, so it's a very simple app, right? Okay, so let's try that. So do you have any questions or clarification until this point? Yeah. So now let's do it, inshallah. Okay. So we have this root component here. So what is the first thing that we can build? We can first build what? We can first build that input field. Okay. We'll do it incrementally. Okay. So every app, if you take, doesn't matter how complex it is, you have to do it incrementally. So in this case, what we can do first is we'll build a small input button, and we will implement the feature so that the user can type something, and if he clicks on the add button, we are going to take that value and we are going to print in the console. Okay, simple as that. That's a very yeah, that's the first step. Okay, then we will keep on modifying, we'll keep on improving. Okay, so the first thing is, what do I need? I need my input button writer, or the input component writer. So let me create a new component here, input.js. Okay, so this is my snippet. Okay, I'm using RFACE. Okay, so I can name this as task input. Okay, because the name input seems too generic. Let me rename that task input. So what do we how to put here? Is that a normal division? I need an input element. So what should I do here? It should be an input element, right? HTML input element, right? So we have a HTML input element. Okay. Now what I should do? I should import this input element, and I will put it here. Okay. So this should be task input. I have imported that here. Okay. Now you can see we have one input box here, so I'm able to type something here. And by the way, here if you see, right, I'm able to type, right, and the values are changing as I type, even though I don't have any event listeners, nothing, right. Here previously we used to do something like we used to have a state variable, and we used to bind that, right, with a value, and also we had an event listener, right. But here it's not there, right. This is called uncontrolled component, uncontrolled input component. This is the normal approach, right. By default, the browser will do it for you. Okay, or in HTML, if you just use this, right, you have that thing out of the box in which you can type and it can change the value, right. That is the default behavior, right. So this component is uncontrolled input component. The reason because we are not worrying about how the value is handled or manipulated, right. We are not doing anything about the value, right. We are not handling the events. We are not manually changing the value, right. Previously, what we used to do, we were controlling that component by way of that variable, right. Something like name, set name is equal to use state, like this, right. This is not a uncontrolled component anymore. This is controlled now. Reason why? Because the value is controlled by this variable here, this state variable. Okay, so this is a controlled input component. But when you take this out, in this case, right, see, I won't be able to change anything. So use state is not defined. Okay. See, if I come and type here, it's working. Name, set name. Huh? No, it's not about the initial value. Okay. I think it's because we are not using any change event handler, right? Let's say on change, handle change, const handle change. This is an empty function, okay, does not do anything. Okay, now let's see this case. It's Ajib. How it's working? No, but that doesn't matter, right? Maybe I think so. Yeah, one minute. That could be a reason actually. Let me check the console. Okay. Yeah. So what's happening here is, let me give some initial value there. Okay, name. In this case, if you see, I'm not able to change anything now. If I type right, it's the same actually, and doesn't matter even if I remove this right, it will be the same actually. See, the reason is because this component now is being controlled by name actually, and previously the reason why previously we were able to edit, right, because we didn't give any name here, right, any initial value, right, so it was undefined, right, it was undefined. So if it is undefined, it's the same whether you put it or not, right? That's the reason why we are able to change here actually, even though we bounded that to this variable. Since it was initially undefined, we are still able to change. But if you give some defined value here, let's say a task, and then you bind it, right, what happens in this case? The component becomes, sorry, it should be value. The component becomes controlled, so you can't change it now. Why? If you type anything, the value won't change because that component is controlled by this variable here, and only if that variable changes, the value will change. Okay, so this is a controlled input component, and in React we do this controlled approach because it gives us a lot of benefits. Okay. So what we'll do now is, okay, we already have this thing here, so we'll change this to task. Okay, task, set task, should be this. Okay, so let's say task is going to be learn React. Now if you see, okay, let me bring that to the center. Okay, so let me add some padding to this component here, because it is on the leftmost corner, right, top left, right, it's kind of hard to see, right. Let me bring that to the center. Okay, so what should I do for that? I can add some padding, right. Do you remember CSS at all? I'm serious, Afi. Tayyib, inshallah. Okay, anyway, so we'll add some padding, okay, to bring this here, or some margin, whatever it may be. So what I'll do is, we have this class name, right? So for this division I can add some padding, okay, because if I add some padding here, definitely this input component is going to be pushed inside, right? For that, what I'll go for the style here. So it's very similar to what we do in HTML, except the slight change. For example, here we say class name, right? Here if you see, class name is equal to app. But in HTML we don't say class name, we only say class, right? Yeah, we can do. We'll come back to those things, inshallah. The different ways of adding styles, but to keep things simpler, because right now we are focusing mainly on the functionalities. Okay, as for styling aspect, we can do it last. Okay, inshallah. So there's a slight difference here. So the first thing is, if you are going to add a class, it should be class name, and that too it should be in camel case like this. And for styling, right, you can use an object here. In HTML, you have to use a string, right? Here it can be an object. And you can write whatever style that you want, like you do in CSS. Okay, So I can say padding is going to be 30 pixels. Now if you see, it has come a bit inside. Okay, I hope you can see this. Should I increase the text size as well, if it's very inconvenient for you? You can see, right, inshallah. Okay, anyway, let me just increase it, So let me come here. So I have to add some styling for this input, right? So what I can do, I'll come here, style. I'm going to increase the font size, okay? So font size is equal to, let's say, 20 pixels. Here if this is camel case. In normal HTML CSS, we use what? We use snake case, right? Often we use kebab case, right? Yeah. Tools like that are there. Yeah, you can use it if you want to save time sometimes. But yeah, so here it is camel case. Okay, font size. So that's going to be 20 pixels. So that's a small style that I added for that. Now you can see it's somewhat big. Okay, let me increase it even further. Okay, let me see 30 pixels. And let me add some padding for that as well, okay, to make it even look more better. So now if you see, it looks very good. Let me add some padding for that. Padding is going to be 15 pixels. Now you see. So we have a box here, input element here, but I'm not able to edit the value here, right? The reason is because we are controlling that component by way of this variable, but we are not handling the change, right? So we have to handle the change, okay? So whenever I type something, I want to handle that event. So on change, handle change, okay? So let me define the function here, const. Okay, let me do one thing. Now if you see here, right, this looks pretty ugly, right, to read. So we want to format this, okay, okay, actually now it's formatted. Yeah, I saved it and it's formatted now. And why it's happening automatically? Yeah, so we are using Prettier here, okay. So it's configured, so that's why when I save it, it's automatically formatting it for me. You can see one property per line, okay. So now we have this function here, handle change. So what I want to do now, inside this function, I want to set the name, okay. So this function accepts one argument, right, E or event, right. So that's a change event, right. So it has this object. So how do I get the name? How do I get the updated name? Dot value. Okay, so set task of e dot target dot value type. So this should be event. Okay, let me keep that e. So I am saving this now. So now we have attached the event listener. So whenever the value changes, this will be set to the updated value. Okay, so now if I come and type, you can see we are able to type it. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to have a button here. Okay, add to do, a button called add to do, and if I click on that, that will be printed in the console. Okay, so I can do one thing. Either I can create a separate button component for that, or I can write it here itself. Okay, but I think it's a it's an overkill if I create a separate component for that button. Okay, so let me define it here itself. Okay, now Mahi, it's your generally right. Generally this kind of things, small things can be put in one file itself. Like in this app, for example, the to-do app, right? I can even write the entire thing in this app component itself. It's your convenience, actually, but generally you know actually. The more code that you write, you will know when to create when to separate them and when to just write things in the same file. Okay. In this case, if you see, like I told, it's an overkill if I create a separate file for this. It's a very small component, right? There's only one element here, so I can put it in the side, right? Button component. No need to separately create another file. Okay. So button add to do. So I added this button here, but why it is showing me this red line? See, it's complaining for me. The reason is because this return statement, right, that can have only one node, okay, or can say it can have only one child, one direct child. In this case, if you see, yes, it should be wrapped. Yeah, when you wrap, there will be only one child. For example, if I wrap this inside a division, right, how many children, how many things are you returning directly? You are returning only one node, right? In this case, this is a node, right? Why we say it's a node? Can you say why we are using the term node? Yeah, but we use the word node because it's a tree actually. If you see your app, right, it's a tree, right? It's a tree of components, right? The data structure, if you see, it's a tree, right? You have the topmost HTML. Inside that you have the head, then you have the body. Body has a lot of children. So each one of that is a node actually, and every node can have its own children. So we say node because in tree data structure, every element is called as a node. Okay. So since our app is a tree data structure, this return statement should return only one node actually. It can't return more than one node. So in this case, it's returning only one node, right? That node has its own child nodes, okay, but on the top node it's only one node. But in the previous case, what happened? This is directly returning two nodes, right? This is not permissible, okay, that is why you are getting this error. So let me wrap that inside this thing. So this is one way. There's also another way actually. If you just want to get rid of that error, right? So in this case, if you see, I don't really need a division here. Do I need a division here? Because this division can be used like maybe for example some CSS justifications. Like I want to add some sort of styling, so I can't do without this wrapper division. In that case, but currently if you see, we just want to get rid of this error, right? I don't really need this extra division actually, right? So what I can do in that case, I can just use this dummy empty opening and closing bracket. Okay, this is called as. Do you know the name, Akhi? It seems like you read the documentation. Yeah. Even I forgot the name, Akhi. That's why I asked you. What is the name of this? No, this is called as. Allahu Alam, I forgot. La ilaha illallah. So it's a wrapper, but there's a very clear dedicated term to refer this actually. Empty wrapper, that's the meaning of it, but 1 minute, let me search for that. Empty, no, 1 minute. Fragment, yeah, React fragments. This is the name, Akhi. Okay, this is an empty wrapper, but this is called as a fragment, technical name. Okay, so this fragment, right, it enables you to wrap the nodes and enable you to return your thing as a one node, but it won't add any extra node in the UI actually. Like if you go and look at the, if you inspect here, right, you won't see any extra things here actually. See, you have division and directly you have input and button. You don't see any extra nodes here, right? Even though we are using something here, but if you look in the DOM, right, there is no extra node actually. So this is the purpose of fragments, okay? So using fragments, I can get rid of that error, okay? So now if you see, I have a button here, right? So what I want to do is, when I click on this button, I want to print whatever I type in the console, okay? Right? So for what should I do for that? What event listener? Yeah, so button on click, handled click. So let me define the function. Const handled click is equal to, what should I do here? Console.log task, right? Because it will be stored inside here, right? Whatever variable, whatever name that we typed there, it would be stored inside task. So I can simply use it here. So what happens in this case? If I click, so I think there's some error there. You provided a value prop to a form field without an on-chain handler. This will do. Why it is like that? Where it is coming from? Okay, this will run a read-only field. If the field should be mutable, use default value. It's only a warning, okay, it's not an error, okay, so let me just neglect that for the time being. So now if you see, learn React, and if I click on add to do, you can see it's in the console. Okay, so this is the first step. Okay, inshallah we will improve on this. Inshallah we will finish now, but I want to point you to one thing, which is, you see how easy it is to get this value here, whatever value that was inside this thing. It's, you didn't even notice that, right? You're easily taking that. What happened if we didn't use this controlled approach? Let's imagine that we are using the uncontrolled approach, in which case it'll be like this, right? So the task is not defined anymore, so we can't do like this. So console.log, let me say, so whatever the value was should be coming here, right? Whatever the latest value should be coming here, but how will you get that value from? Where will you get that value? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask? Yeah, so in this case, see, I'm able to type actually learn React. If I click on add to do, nothing will be printed because that value is not available. So I have to get, I want to fetch that value. How can I do that? What is the traditional approach that you learned in JavaScript? Yes, from input only. So what you can do, what you have to do is, you either have to attach some ID or some class name, and inside this function, you have to use that ID to query that element and to get that name, right? That is the way actually. But if you go with the controlled approach, it's very easy for you. You can just use this value anywhere, okay? You don't have to, every time go and query it whenever you want to use that. It also has other advantages, okay? So that's the reason why we go with this controlled approach, because it is very easy for you to work in that, okay? So, inshallah, so we can. So this is where we left, right? Let me delete this one. So here, if you see, we can conveniently access this value whenever we want, okay? So now if you see, I can come here and type something, and that will be printed in the console, inshallah. So this is the first step, okay? So tomorrow we will go with the other remaining task, okay? But I think until this point, you understand, right? Everything, how things are working. So shall I push this code? Do you need this code, or like you won't need it? You can refer the code at last, right? Inshallah. So today also we discussed a lot of concepts, right? Rules of hooks, control components, non-control components. So you can listen to this lecture once again, and you can take the notes, inshallah. We'll see tomorrow, okay? طيب inshallah. وإياكم أخي سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.